What's going on, people? In this video we're about to break down episode 23 of Attack on Titan season 4, in which Annie's full backstory was revealed and Captain Levi finally makes a return to the series. Today I'll be explaining all the small details you might have missed, including exactly how Connie tricked Falco into coming along with him, and how in this episode, Armin failed an important responsibility that Levi had given him years earlier. Before we get into it though, this video is sponsored by Dragon City, which is a free-to-play mobile game available on Android and iOS. In the game, there are literally thousands of dragons to collect, including a particular series of dragon called the Titans, although not the kind of Titans you might be used to seeing on this channel. You can breed two dragons together to create new ones, hatch them and feed them so that they evolve, and you can even train your dragon to make them more powerful. On top of that, the game has PvP modes where you can challenge your friends in combat and fight against other dragon trainers, not to mention mini games like the ones on screen, where you can claim daily prizes. By collecting food, gold and gems, you can customize your own city to reach new levels, and along the way you might discover dragons based off popular content creators, including the Sidemen dragon, the George Not Found dragon, and many others. If you download the game by clicking my special link in the description, then you'll get a free starter pack only available to new users, which includes 30,000 gold, 15,000 food, plus the very rare Snowdrift dragon. This offer is available for a limited time, so be sure to check out the link, and thanks again to Dragon City for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so episode 23 begins in Stoes, but nowadays thanks to Eren it's looking a lot different. Because nobody on Paradis knew that he was planning to destroy all three walls, it meant that many civilians in Stoes had their homes crushed without warning, and a ton of people died in the fallout. In this scene, Hitch and a couple other MPs pull an injured woman out the rubble, and as the bodies pile up, some of the civilians start to question whether Eren's actions were worth the sacrifice. On one side you have people who see Eren as a kind of villain for killing his own people, whereas on the other side you have those who believe that these deaths are justified to stop them all from being wiped out by Marley. As violence breaks out between the civilians, Hitch then returns to HQ to gather some resources to deal with it, but as she enters the building, she notices this trail of liquid. The trail directly leads out from the basement where the female Titan's crystal has been locked away for years, and this was a deliberate trap that Annie had set. By not covering her tracks, she was hoping that someone would follow the trail, at which point she'd ambush them, steal their clothes and sneak out of town. What she wasn't expecting was that the person to come through this door would be Hitch, as these two have a history together, not only as roommates in the MPs, but also because Hitch was the main person who was looking after her crystal the whole time. Now, in this moment, Annie is easily overpowered by her former roommate, since she's pretty weak, having not moved a muscle in 4 years. This enabled Hitch to pin her down without much problem, but the real issue here is that the female Titan had already cut herself with this special ring. The blade inside this ring is what she typically uses to transform, and so in theory, she could have become a Titan right then and blown up HQ. Of course, there was the chance that she didn't have the energy to do this in her weakened state, but it wasn't a risk that Hitch was willing to take. With the power of the Titans being so unpredictable, it was safer for everyone in the building if she just did what Annie said, and that's how the two of them end up in the stables. The plan here is that Hitch would quietly take the female Titan outside of the district, and during this conversation we got an insight into what it's like to live inside a crystal. The way Annie describes it, it's like a state of partial consciousness where she could hear what's happening around her, but other than that it was basically like a dark dream. All that time, the only company she had was Armin's news updates and Hitch ranting about men, so it is a miracle that Annie hasn't turned out any crazier than she used to be. As they leave town, we see more of the carnage as people mourn their dead relatives, and Hitch makes an interesting observation that her only meaningful work has been cleaning up after the destruction. Generally speaking, that statement is probably true for most MPs, since their jobs usually don't involve improving humanity. In fact, for most of their existence, they were used by the king to prevent humanity from progressing. For that reason, you can see why Hitch would find some meaning in helping people to rebuild after these disasters, and the first time she had to do it was after Eren and Annie tore up Stoes. Moving on, they then have an honest discussion about Annie's motivations, and this added a ton of context to her actions in the first season. To start things off, we find out that Annie was abandoned as a baby by her real parents, since just like Reiner, she was the result of an affair between an Eldian and a regular human. Because of that, she was adopted by Mr. Leonhardt, who himself was an Eldian from a foreign country. He knew that by raising Annie to become a warrior, it would give him the title of honorary Marleyan, and all the benefits that come with that, and so during her childhood he aggressively trained her in the martial arts from his homeland. The endless practicing and physical abuse made it so that she eventually saw no value in any life, whether it was her own life, the lives of animals, or the lives of the soldiers she had to kill. From her perspective, none of it had any meaning, and as a consequence she also didn't care about saving the world like the other warrior candidates did. Anyway, once she grew up strong enough, she beat up Mr. Leonhardt to repay him for all the suffering he put her through, and this beatdown was so bad that he received permanent damage to his knee, explaining why he's usually seen with a walking stick. After then graduating to become a fully fledged warrior, she was then chosen for the invasion of Paradis, and the morning of her deployment is when Mr. Leonhardt dropped to his knees and apologized for everything he'd done. This moment here is a more detailed version of this flashback from the first season, as it does a better job of conveying just how devastated he was. Although he'd never shown his true feelings until this moment, he did in fact view Annie as his real daughter, and to him the title of honorary Marleyan didn't mean anything if she never returned from the island. It was only once she heard this speech and looked into his eyes that she realized how much he cared, and from that point onwards it became her singular motivation to make it back home alive. This motivation has been demonstrated many times. For example, when Marcel was eaten, it was Annie who suggested they should go back home, and while stomping out Reiner, she made it clear how desperate she was to return to Marley alive. Then, a few years later when they were inside the walls, it was Annie again who suggested they should go back without completing their mission. She's also the warrior who arguably put in the most work into locating the founder so they could go home, and those tears when she was captured was because she wasn't able to fulfill her promise. Now, in the present day, Annie accepts that her previous view on life having no value was wrong, and that all the deaths she caused wasn't really justified. However, she did still say that she'd do everything the same way if it meant she could get back to her dad. Switching over to the internment zone in Liberia, we then see one of the most realistic aspects of the rumbling, which is that these Eldians have to actually try and convince regular people that they're all about to be trampled. Given that Eren's declaration was only heard by subjects of YMIR, the Marleyan guards have no way of verifying what the crowd is telling them, and the head guard seems to believe this is all some kind of elaborate Eldian conspiracy. As a result, the guards start to round up everyone, including Annie's dad and Reiner's mother and the other warrior parents, which reinforces the idea that being honorary Marleyans means nothing in the eyes of actual Marleyans. With his hands behind his head, Mr. Leonhardt remembers his daughter promising to return, and the reason this gives him strength is because he needs to stay alive himself if he's ever going to see her again. He's always believed that Annie is still out there, but obviously if these guards keep him in the internment zone, then they'll all be crushed by the rumbling in a few hours. Because of this, he had to do something to get out of the situation, and in this scene Mr. Leonhardt turns around to face the guard, followed by the immediate sound of shots being fired. The anime then transitions very nicely back to the island, where Instructor Shardis overhears the sound of Floch's gunfire. At this particular time, pretty much all the surviving characters in Shiganshina are somewhere inside this fort, with the Yeagerists now establishing their control. The Yeagerists made it very clear earlier in the season that someone of the old leadership like Shardis was disposable to them, which is exactly why these cadets want to get him out of there as soon as possible. There's no doubt that his safety will be in danger if he sticks around, but instead his priority is making sure that his students can survive in this new world the Yeagerists are creating, which is the reason why he let them beat him up. Shardis knew that someone like him was never going to make it regardless of what happened, but if his cadets join the Yeagerists, then they'll survive until one day they can start a revolution. This ties into what Hange was saying last season, in that when one group takes over from another, it's only a matter of time until the cycle of revolution eventually repeats again. Now, in the changing room, Armin is getting ready for a trip to Ragako village, as he's determined to try and stop Connie from feeding Falco to his mother. His aim in doing this isn't simply to save Falco, as I'm pretty sure those two have never had a conversation, but rather he's doing this to earn Gabby's trust. If Gabby trusts Armin, then it might be possible for the scouts to use that trust to ease their conflict with Reiner and Peak, who are both still somewhere on the island. As he goes to leave, Mikasa asks him what they should do about Eren, and this is when Armin loses it at her, possibly for the first time ever. The reason he snaps is because of all the things going on right now. Eren is dead last when it comes to what they should be dealing with. For example, nobody knows where Levi and Hange are, Annie is back, the volunteers that have helped them for years are now in trouble, and there's an unknown number of casualties on the island. On top of that, the Queen is possibly in danger, as right now they have no idea what the Yeagerists plan to do with her. With all that going on, no one is in any position to be thinking about Eren, hence why Armin lost his composure at the question. He then goes on to rightly point out that Commander Erwin wouldn't have reacted in the same way, and follows this by admitting that he wasn't the one who Levi should have saved. If we flash back to 4 years ago, no one was realistically expecting the commander to be replaced, but one thing Levi asked of Armin was that he didn't make himself or anyone else regret the choice. That was meant to be his responsibility going forward, but now we can say that it's a responsibility that he's definitely failed. In crisis situations like this, Erwin always remained level-headed even when other people were losing it, and this distinction between the two is why Armin feels the way he does. Anyhow, as Armin leaves, Mikasa notices her scarf is missing, and the last time we saw it she left it alone in this room with her #1 stalker, Things then briefly switch to outside, where Niccolo and the Brass family say their last goodbyes to Gabby, since it's unclear if they'll ever see the warrior candidate again. As we know, Gabby and Armin's current mission is to make it to Ragako village before Falco gets eaten, but beyond that we know her motivation is to stop Eren from rumbling the world. Therefore, there's a decent chance that her time on Paradis might be coming to an end very soon, which is why this whole interaction felt very final. Back inside the fort, we see the volunteers have been rounded up just like Floch wanted in the last episode, and this moment helps to explain why Eren left him in charge of the Yeagerists. 10 months ago, we already knew that Eren and Yelena had a secret meeting where she told him about the euthanization plan, and Floch is the one who enabled that meeting to happen. Soon after this, Eren revealed to Floch that he planned to betray Zeke, and ever since then Floch has been gathering allies, which is why the Yeagerists were so strong in numbers and well organized as soon as the revolution began. With the rumbling now underway, pretty much everything has gone the way they intended, but being the psycho that he is, Floch mocks the volunteers for their homelands being destroyed. A lot of these volunteers are from countries that were invaded by Marley, and they helped Paradis because they thought it would weaken the Marleyans and therefore benefit their own nations. That's why this guy was so angry at Floch, since all the volunteers have been betrayed, and it's why he was never going to submit to the Yeagerists. Sadly, this stance is what got him executed, pretty brutally as well, and this was done to show the other volunteers what's going to happen to them if they don't comply. Remember, at this moment in time, the island still quite literally has no functioning government, so Floch's mission is to bring order to Paradis, and a part of that involves wiping out anyone who would resent the Yeagerists being in charge. Now, when it comes to Jean, this is a really tricky situation for him, since on the one hand, Eren and Floch have created a situation where he can finally stop fighting, and he can live a comfy life in the interior just like he used to talk about. On the other hand, he knows that this treatment of the volunteers and the destruction of their homelands is objectively wrong, which explains this very guilty look with Onyankopon. No matter what happens, it's inevitable that in the near future Jean will have to make a difficult choice. Either he can ignore his morals and allow the Yeagerists to continue, or he can take some kind of stand against them, which would mean sacrificing his life of luxury in the new Eldian Empire. As the scene ends, Mikasa asks Floch about what happened to Levi and Hange, and he tries to deceive her by saying that Zeke killed them. Don't get me wrong, he likely does believe that these two are dead by now, but by saying it in this way, he's making it seem like the Yeagerists had nothing to do with it. In reality, Floch saw Levi as a threat to the Yeagerists and wanted him to be killed, evidenced by the fact that he was gonna kill him before Hange jumped in the river. By leaving out that information, Floch is trying to avoid conflict with these two, since, like I said, one of his main goals is to minimize the amount of people who oppose the Yeagerists. Elsewhere on the island, Connie and Falco were heading towards Ragako on horseback, and the two main things we need to understand from this interaction is that number one, Falco has no idea he's inherited the Jaw Titan. In the past, we've seen that new Titan shifters usually forget the events surrounding how they got their power, and in Falco's case, the last thing he remembers is being with Colt and Gabby. This means that he doesn't know his brother is dead, he doesn't know Galliard is dead, and he also doesn't seem to be aware of the rumbling. Point number two is that Connie took advantage of this memory loss by making up a fake story, and now the young warrior believes that he's being taken to a hospital. The credits then finish with Falco feeling like he's seen Connie somewhere before, and this is referring to the airship where the warrior candidates definitely would have seen him. In particular, there was one moment where he dramatically opened the door to announce Sasha's death, and Gabby and Falco were both in the room at that time. Things then move over to General Magath and the Cart Titan, who watch on as the remaining Marleyan airships leave them behind. With the rumbling marching towards the continent, these ships are going to warn everyone about what's happening, but Magath acknowledges there's nothing anyone can actually do to stop the destruction. The Cart Titan then reacts as Hange approaches them from behind, and this is the first time we've seen the commander since the first episode of part 2. In that time, she managed to steal a horse and fix up Captain Levi, who is very much alive despite not being in the best shape. Now, you might be wondering what Hange would gain from approaching Pekin Magath in this way, and the answer is that at this moment both sides sort of want to achieve the same thing. To be more specific, Levi wants to kill Zeke, which is something the general has tried to do several times, and Hange doesn't agree with Eren destroying all life on the planet, which is something that no Marleyan wants to happen. By combining their forces, it would make achieving those goals at least a bit more plausible, and this potential alliance should be explored in more detail next week. Anyway people, that was my breakdown for episode 23 of Attack on Titan Season 4, and if it helped you to understand the episode in any way, then I'd appreciate if you dropped a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to check out the special link in the description to download Dragon City and get your free rewards. Thanks for watching the video as always, and until the next one, peace out.